As a parent of young children, if you were to ask me, Ashton, what is one of the biggest reverse culture shocks you experience when you head back to the United States? Well, honestly, one of my top 10 items would have to be playgrounds. Play spaces in the US, quite frankly, just seem to be over-sanitized, over-padded, and overly prescriptive in how children should safely play. But in my experience, that is definitely not how playgrounds are largely constructed here in Germany. Play spaces where children not only climb to significant heights without safety rails, but are actually encouraged to take risks by operating machinery, using tools, and getting down and dirty, all without largely any parental supervision. So how did we get here? And what are the consequences for our children? And why do I feel at the end of the day that play spaces like these dangerous ones here in Germany are actually super important for child development? Well, let's take a look. Fun fact, did you know that playgrounds were actually kind of invented by a German person? Well, sort of. There are many great minds behind the genesis of the playground, but to be honest, a lot of people give credit to their founding to the philosopher and educator Friedrich Froebel in 1885, who also came up with the concept for kindergarten. But despite their wide adoption into the parks and schoolyards across the United States in the 20th century, the playgrounds of today look a heck of a lot different when you compare the two. And this, again, is one of the more stark reverse culture shocks when I return back to the United States, because quite frankly, the state of play there just feels different. Here in the local park just down the street from my house in Germany, kids are encouraged to rock climb without a safety harness in sight. Or at this one, where they can climb up some 30 vertical feet. Or at this one, experiment with miniature construction machinery and civil engineering. Or at this one, take a zip line that launches them from one side of the park to the other. But you know, it isn't just happenstance that German playgrounds tend to be more adventurous and challenging. Of course, there's a method to this madness. In Germany, as in other parts of Europe, there is an increasing focus on the idea that children benefit from being exposed to manageable risks. And deconstructed play spaces can help to foster a sense of resilience and independent play. One such play space is called an adventure playground, and these are unstructured playgrounds that have loose materials like wood, stones, and ropes, and basically engage a child's imagination to make play experiences fun. And this is actually exactly the design of my son's kindergarten play space in the garden outside of the building that he just adores. It's awesome because children get to create, build, and construct in a supervised area, but one that's not overly prescriptive in how kids should play. And again, they rely largely on natural materials. And these kind of play spaces are very important because they focus on autonomy and exploration. Studies in Germany emphasize that children who engage in free play with challenging elements such as climbing structures, uneven surfaces, and opportunities for social negotiation tend to have better outcomes in emotional regulation, independence, and social competence. When children are involved in riskier, self-directed play, they tend to interact more and develop complex social hierarchies and friendships, leading to higher self-esteem and well-being. So with all of these great advantages, it kind of had me wondering, why don't we have more of these kind of play spaces in the United States? Well, as it turns out, we kind of used to. As a 90s kid, I have fond memories of the rickety death traps that I personally grew up with. If you're watching this video from the US along with me, you probably remember the ones with the towering monkey bar pyramids, rusty merry-go-rounds that flung you off if you didn't have like a death grip on them, teeter-totters that launched kids skyward, those shredded rubber tire ground coverings that smelled like oil in the summer heat, and those metal slides that left you with second-degree burns in the summertime if you sat on them for too long. Yeah, okay, some of these regulations were probably necessary. But beyond public parks, my fellow other millennial kids were also treated to pretty awesome play spaces at McDonald's restaurants. Back in the day, after I was finished eating my nuggets and fries, I could go climb multi-level structures with tunnels, slides, ball pits, and more. And these were so much fun, and one of the big reasons that I honestly used to beg my parents to take me there on a weekend for lunch. Sadly, the McDonald's of today have either decided to basically just get rid of them altogether or replace them with much, much smaller, safer, padded structures that, quite frankly, just aren't the same. Which really had me wondering, what the heck happened? Well, for this part of the story, we're gonna have to go back a little bit to the 1980s, the decade of hairspray, mall culture, and, well, whatever these pants were. In 1981, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission published its first handbook for public playground safety, providing voluntary guidelines for playground equipment design, installation, and maintenance. The recommendations included specifications for safe heights, equipment spacing, and proper surfaces, like wood chips or sand, to reduce injury and risks. Fast forward to the 1990s, and the CPSC updated its handbook several times to reflect new research. There was an increasing focus on eliminating entrapment hazards, ensuring age-appropriate equipment, and emphasizing maintenance. And so today, modern playgrounds must adhere to ASTM standards as well as CPSC guidelines, and most new playgrounds are designed to be inclusive, safe, and engaging with attention to both physical and cognitive development, which definitely all sound like great things. The only issue I kind of have with it is that risk, and risk assessment specifically, isn't an exact science. Consensus amongst many researchers and safety experts in risk management agree that oftentimes safety measures are simply introduced because someone, somewhere, is of the opinion that they might be effective. Many of the updates that have been included in the standards are not actually derived from real risk or accidents, but are merely based on the proposed theoretical what-if accident scenarios. The truth of the matter is, it's really, really, really difficult to anticipate all of the different ways that someone might injure themselves and objectively prevent accidents from happening, especially because kids will actually adjust their behavior if they're aware that safety measures are in place. In other words, science shows that kids actually take more risks and do more unsafe behaviors because those safety precautions are in place. Psychologists call this risk compensation because an individual believes that they are safe, they can, as a result, overestimate their own abilities. Fortunately, serious injuries and fatalities on playgrounds are extraordinarily rare. However, we do also know that there are very real consequences to children's health and well-being when you don't give them the opportunity to experience danger and risk in, a measured and manageable way. This daredevil behavior born of frustration of overly padded and protected play zones is actually credited as a main cause of playground accidents according to researchers, who conducted a systematic review of the scientific literature on playground safety in 2015. Their results showed that engaging in risk is actually really important in preventing injuries. Children are given the opportunity to learn how their bodies work, how the world works, and the fundamental skills that ultimately protect them. Which is something I really, really appreciate when I take my kids to the playgrounds here in Germany, because I really do feel that the playgrounds in my area tend to help my sons navigate their body, tend to figure out how to maneuver in uneven spaces, but also still find a way to manage this balance of safety and risk. Again, at this playground, there are rope courses, wooden climbing structures, and that cool zip line. It's Jack's favorite thing. And this is also incredibly important for children's mental health. A comprehensive study by the German Youth Institute reported that children who have access to challenging playgrounds experience lower rates of anxiety and depression in comparison to children whose play environments are overly structured or constrained. So if we know that there are these real benefits to, again, manageable risk, why then do we tend to just mitigate risk at all costs in the US playground design? Well, perhaps the other big reason why playgrounds are structurally different from European playgrounds has nothing to do with the playgrounds at all, but rather just simply differences in our legal system. Now, I don't want to dive too deeply down this rabbit hole because I've actually already made a video on the differences in s𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗢𝗥 culture between the United States and Germany, which I will link down below in the description of this video if you want to watch more. But essentially what it boils down to are just fundamental differences in tort law and the way liability is measured between Germany and the United States. So for this section, I just want to briefly cover some of the most important parts, at least how they apply specifically to playgrounds. For starters, it's well documented that the scale of damages resulting from tort law litigation in Germany is substantially lower than in the United States. So, for example, where a broken arm and hand on a school playground might produce a jury award of $170,000, like this one in New Jersey, in Germany it would produce an award much, much less, if at all. So why are there such a big difference in these numbers? Well, for starters, Germans have really, really great public health insurance. And here in Germany, if you have kids, they're covered at no additional cost by the parents' public health insurance policy. And to top that off, you probably aren't going to sue for really high medical bills if they don't exist in the first place. Second, while there are pain and suffering awards in Germany, they're typically much, much lower than in the United States. Take this case, for example, where a California couple sued their school district after the child broke his leg playing the game Red Rover during an unsupervised gym class. The district paid a $15,000 settlement to cover medical fees, attorney costs, and pain and suffering in the case. And last but not least, there are typically no punitive damages in Germany, although it is worth mentioning that unlike probably what Hollywood would lead us to believe, it's actually not as common as we think it is in the United States either. But it's not unheard of. You do still see lawsuits like this one in the United States, where a school district was sued after a student broke his leg because they were allegedly aware of the second grader's prior episodes of leaping from the slide, with multiple teachers having been told the boy, hey, knock that off. However, the complaint stated he, quote, continued to engage in the dangerous behavior, end quote, and the school district allegedly continued to allow the boy to use the play area unsupervised. Resultantly, they sought not only compensation for general negligence, hospital and medical expenses, general damages, but also compensatory damages, according to proof. So yeah, in light of all of these different kinds of lawsuits, perhaps it's not so surprising that American playgrounds have become more and more risk averse. This is a sentiment that was actually echoed by Olga Jarrett, a University State University professor, from remarks given in a tort reform group where she blames a, quote, fear of lawsuits that makes some school systems and cities designed playgrounds that are completely uninteresting to kids, end quote. And she's not wrong. I personally was equally amused and shocked by all of the warning labels covering playgrounds that I saw in the United States. Seriously, some of the playgrounds, they were on every single climbing structure, which, yeah, again, was really, really shocking to see. But I also kind of had to wonder, beyond the lawsuits, beyond the legal aspects of it, is maybe also part of the problem that our parenting styles have evolved, and maybe a little bit of this parental anxiety that so many of us feel. Could this also be contributing to the differences in the way that playgrounds are designed? And well, what I found is, yeah, probably. A 2012 study suggests that a new cause behind American childhood obesity and children leading sedentary lifestyles is, you guessed it, boring playgrounds. The study published in the February 2012 issue of Pediatrics found that because of stricter licensing codes, playgrounds are now less physically challenging and more boring to children. Not only are kids less interested in the playgrounds, some parents also ask daycare staff to restrict their child's physical activity for fear of injury. And please don't get me wrong. I think it's a good thing that parents don't want their kids to get hurt and that they want to try to protect them and do whatever they can to make sure that they're safe. But there has been just this monumental shift that I've really noticed in the difference that I think in parenting styles that happen between the US and Germany. Specifically in the United States, this change that I think is really happening in where we used to kind of adopt this community style approach to raising kids, and now we're in this individual approach. And you have all of these pressures as a parent to keep your child safe. I've actually talked about this before on a video, and I'll also, again, link that down below in the description if you want to watch it. But I I really think that here in Germany, there's still this sentiment of it takes a village to raise a child. And it's something that I personally think is becoming less and less prevalent in American communities. And it doesn't help that parents today are also constantly inundated with shock and horror news reports about child dangers on the one hand, and Instagram-filtered parental comparisons telling us that we aren't doing enough, thanks to social media and smartphones on the other. But honestly, despite what the news and social media tells us, children today are a heck of a lot safer than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago, especially in public parks and on playgrounds. According to Johns Hopkins, nationally each year, more than 220,000 children are treated in hospital emergency departments for injuries occurring on playgrounds, mostly for fractures, sprains, or cuts. And unfortunately, there have been child deaths from playground equipment. The most commonly cited number that I could find is an average of 15 per year, which is based on accounting for 147 reported deaths between 1990 and 2000 on playground equipment. But it's worth noting that 70% of those occurred on home playground equipment, not at public parks or at schoolyards. The risk of serious injury or death is very, very scary. But that risk is substantially lower than driving your kids around in a car, letting your child ride their bicycle, or enrolling them in sports, which most parents don't think twice about doing. Risk is hard to think about, and the reality is that letting your kid play in a playground does involve some risk. But I do think that it is worth taking a look at the total picture here. When you balance the low risk of serious injury on playgrounds with the risks of children not playing, like higher risks of obesity and the risks of isolation and that toll that it takes on mental health, I think that we're probably being overly cautious about the wrong risk. And that specifically definitely plays a huge role in the mentality and the design of playgrounds here in Germany. A 2017 study by the Deutsches Jugendinstitut found that German parents largely embraced the idea that children should engage in unsupervised play, even in urban environments. This is because children who were allowed to play independently exhibited greater problem-solving skills and emotional resilience, according to that study. And I do think at the end of the day, while again, no one wants to see kids get hurt or injured, I do think that there is a growing consensus that maybe we have gone a little bit too far in overprotecting our kids and making these playgrounds just, quite frankly, boring. And the US is actually primed to maybe swing a little bit back in the direction of dangerous, risky playground design. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that there are some really cool examples of playground design that have started to adopt unstructured free play and reintroduce back climbing and balancing features that are riskier once more. It's just unclear as to whether or not these kind of designs would be more widespread, especially if there's going to be any kind of change in litigation and tort law reform that would allow cities and villages and schools to implement this kind of design without the fear of being litigated. But I personally love these kind of play structures for my kids. I really think they make such a difference in childhood development. These playgrounds encourage risk-taking, autonomy, and social interaction, all of which contribute to emotional resilience, creativity, physical health, and cognitive development. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. What do you think are some of the biggest differences that you saw in this video between US playground design and German playground design? And yeah, maybe also let me know down below, what was your favorite thing that you enjoyed playing on when you were a kid? As always, let me know. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from Type Ashton, hit that subscribe button. So I'll see you next Sunday. Cheers!